Welcome to The Artist Remains. I'm PE Pinkman, and today I'm joined by painter Vincent Salvati, a New Jersey-based abstract artist whose layered work turns emotion and memory into color and gesture. Vince has said that the things we play with and the people who help us play make a great difference in our lives, a belief that drives his process. I'm excited to talk with him about play, painting, and what remains in the art long after the paint dries. Vincent, welcome. Thanks for agreeing to be the inaugural online interview for The Artist Remains. How are you today?
Good, and happy to be here.
I'm really pleased that you were willing to do this with me to get it started. I have to say, as I think I mentioned in my email, that I'm just disappointed I'm not able to be there for the openings and do some of these artist talks, which I loved so much. So this is my next best approach, and hopefully it will work.
Yeah, well,
So
you did
if
the
you would
well,
take a minute
well,
and just introduce yourself. Was that intro made sense to you? Is it still relevant to what you're doing? And talk about your.
yeah, so, I consider myself a painter, mostly abstract. I do other things as well, but I really kind of consider myself a painter above everything else. And, yeah, I use color and mark making and shape to portray emotions, and that's pretty much what you said is what my work is about.
Is that something that is still relevant? I mean, you know, I'm going to say my first real introduction to your work in a broader sense was when you had this show on the first floor gallery at Watchung, the play series, but your work's evolved since then. Is that still relevant to your work? Is that still something that is important to what you do?
Yeah, so the play series kind of focused on the idea of play. We were kind of coming out of COVID and some pretty dark times, and I wanted to create something that was more alive and was not as somber as the times were. And so, yes, my work has kind of moved from that. And mostly what I see my work to be about, other than the obvious color and mark making and surface, is about memory and time. And play kind of went along with that as well, in its own way, because it was kind of a looking back or thinking back to a time when I and we were young and as children and the way we played. So it kind of ties into the theme that has kind of been with my work all along and still is.
Yeah, I mean, it feels that way when you look at it. I mean, seeing the latest pieces that you have up feel very much the same way if I'm talking about an emotional response to them. They have this emotional connection that is lighthearted and joyful, which I think is fantastic because a lot of art doesn't have that. It takes itself very seriously, and all of that is relevant and important, but it's really nice to have pieces that you can just kind of roll around with and enjoy.
Right.
One thing I was thinking about is you talk about play as something relational and embodied in your work. In a time when algorithms can generate images without ever touching paint, what do you think remains uniquely human in your process? That's a little tough question, but a good one, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, AI is everywhere now. It's in everything that we do, and it's really invading the art world. But I think AI can generate images, but I don't think it can do what I and most painters do, and that is involve emotion into the work, right? It can learn from all of the work that we as humans feed it, and then it can generate an image from that, but the emotion that I use and feel when I'm making the work, it can't do that. The other thing that I think that makes my work and probably a lot of artists' work different than AI is that there's a time duration, right? Like AI is going to generate it within seconds, if not minutes, right? Whereas for me, it's about creating it over a period of days, weeks, months, even years. And if I go into the studio on a Monday and I put down a couple of layers of paint, and then I come back on a Thursday and I put more layers, each time I come back, there's a just different temperament. I bring something different, my mood, my feelings, what's happening to me that day. So the emotions that I bring into the studio each time build upon each other, and then I wipe them away and I add them again and I change things. So that process I think is really important, which you don't get from AI. And I think the other thing that AI, at least as far as I know, can't do yet, was they build a robot that can physically paint, is creating surface. As you know, is one of the most important things to me in my work is my surface and building that paint up layer after layer. So AI can generate an image on the screen. You can print it out onto a flat piece of paper or onto a canvas, but it's not going to have that dimensional surface.
Yeah, it's an interesting question always for an artist, even before the advent of AI. What is it that stays behind in a painting? Why do paintings or sculpture or any art form, why do some of them resonate more than others over generations sometimes? And it's definitely an intangible thing that does seem to have a time component to it. It does seem to have a practice component to it. Like, for most artists, I think it takes place, the skill to do that takes place over time. It doesn't happen automatically. Would you say that makes sense from what you're saying? It sounds like you're kind of coming at it from the same place.
Yeah, I think so. And I also, when I create a series of paintings, I'm learning from each one and bringing what I learned from the investigation into the next painting and the next painting. So there's yes, that time is really important, and the learning process is really important in creating each of the works. And the stuff that I learned, 10 years ago is still playing into my work, but in a different way, right? And I continue to hopefully evolve and the work evolves. So
So that's a good place to segue into this question, actually. So, what was the motivator for you to become a painter or an artist to begin with? And equally as important is what keeps you doing it?
yeah, so I guess when I was in high school, to appease my art teacher, I decided or agreed to create a painting, and he tricked me, and I fell in love with it. It was something that I didn't have experience with. I did it, and it just kind of clicked like nothing else had clicked prior to that. And then, of course, I went on to art school, I went to Pratt, and just being there and everything that I learned, it just kind of it all resonated. It all just made sense as I was doing it and learning it and as things were building up. So that's kind of the beginning. That's kind of where it started. And it's just something that I've always done since then. It's just always kind of been a part of me. And I think the thing that keeps me going is the fact that there is no end, that it's so open-ended. I can continue painting and learning and developing and growing as an artist forever. So that
Very true.
open-endedness just kind of keeps me going. I think that's yeah, that's really does it.
How do you, I mean, obviously, it sounds like you've been painting now for a long time. How do you incorporate that into your day to day life? I mean, all of us have to figure out various ways to survive, and thrive. And art isn't always the easiest or best way to do that. So, how have you managed to keep art alive in your life while you're also doing whatever else is necessary?
Yeah, yeah, working full-time job kinda takes away from that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like, ooh, yeah, I just try to find whatever time I can, um, to be in the studio, but it's a lot less than I'd like to be, but I supplement that with other things, like writing and thinking about art and the ideas that I have about art, and it's just I think art is not just putting paint on a canvas, but it's reading about art, learning about art, keeping those ideas fresh in my mind, thinking about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And a lot of times, even when I'm in the studio, I just sit there and look at the work and try to understand what I'm doing, try to figure out what the next step is. So there's a lot that goes on in my head,
Right.
even more so than what goes on the canvas.
One of the things that I've noticed in your work, at least the works that I'm familiar with, which go back a few years, is that you repeat some very specific and simple shapes, circles, especially in ovals and sort of, not, I wouldn't call them geometric shapes, but things that are related to soft edged squares and rectangles and things like that. Do those shapes have specific meaning for you, or should they for us? Or could you relate us to those?
Yeah, so I've built over the years this language of these organic shapes, and I mostly kind of use them as an anchor for the painting. I use them to balance the painting. I use them to kind of draw the viewer's eye around the painting, but largely as an anchor. Yeah, and that's kind of so they may mean things to me sometimes, they may not, but they don't necessarily need to mean anything to the viewer. I would rather the viewer come to the work, bring their own history, their own baggage, their own lives to the work, feel what they're gonna feel from it, and take away what they're gonna take, which would be different from for everyone. So, I like that they're kind of the ambiguity of them, where, maybe the viewer doesn't know what they are, but as long as it holds them and it lets them figure out for themselves what they are.
Hmm.
It also works with scale, right? Because you don't know, are they micro, are they macro? They can be so many different
That's very
things.
true. Yeah.
And I like that idea where the viewer can decide what it is and let the viewer take from it.
So when you have someone looking at your work without you intervening in that conversation, you see that as a separate conversation between them and your work. And it's not so much that you're trying to give them a specific idea as much as to let them bring their own interpretation and their own reaction. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yeah. I think looking at especially with abstraction, you can read into it, right? There's no narrative there in my work. So the viewer can read into it however they however they feel, whatever, if they make a connection with the painting and there's something there for them, then that's great. And also as especially with a lot of these more recent paintings, I think the longer you look at them, the more time you spend with them, the more things you can get out of them. And I don't know that it being super obvious is important if the viewer wants to do the work, right? I think art should be work to some
Right.
degree, right? I don't think it should just be handed to the viewer always on a platter. Here, this is what this means. Sometimes, working for it is good. So, it's just like a book, right? If you're gonna read a really good book, well, you have to work for it. You have to read the 300, 400 pages to get that out of it. And it's the same thing with a painting, I think, is the longer you spend with it, the 10th viewing, the 20th viewing, you start to find different things. And I'm good with that. I would prefer that than to say, oh, this is what the piece is about. This is what you
Right.
should understand about it.
I've been reading recently that some people are thinking about the importance of abstract work in particular as a counter to artificial intelligence. The idea being that abstraction will always have its own sort of authenticity outside of an AI generated image. Would you say that that's necessarily true? Do you see artificial intelligence having had any influence on what you're doing to this point?
AI doesn't influence my work, and I don't see that it ever will because I love the process that I go through. So to allow AI to do part of it or any of, something involved with it would just not feel right for me. On a technical level, right now, I don't see how it can. I mean, I could ask it to generate a composition, but again, that just feels like it's not part of me. So I don't see it affecting my work. I see it maybe affecting a lot of areas of the art world, but I'm not sure how that's gonna pan out. But for myself and the work that I create, yeah, I don't see
Do
it
you think
affect.
that your work being abstract allows that to be sort of more easily seen and understood? Or doesn't it make any difference whether it's representational or abstract? That artwork that's created by people will always have something different or undefinable or challenging to define or to acknowledge, but that's different from what you would get out of an AI generated image.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's so much creativity out there and so many good artists creating stuff that I just can't see AI coming up with that type of work. Take Jenny Saville, right? I
Hmm.
mean, that kind of work, AI is not just gonna come up with this concept and these ideas and the way that she paints and,
Right.
you know so I think that AI could do a lot of things, but I don't think it could do the really, really good stuff. It could generate you could say, "Hey, generate an image of whatever, this thing," but it's not gonna generate something like that.
Right. So the thing we all know about AI is that it can look back, right? It looks back at all the stuff that's been done before it and it accumulates all of those things. But I guess the question is, can it look forward, right? Can it do what artists are always trying to do, which is to look past what they've already learned into something different, some new interpretation or understanding or even insight? And, I'm not sure that it's possible, but obviously that remains to be seen. So you have work in a show currently at the Watchung Arts Center called Resilience and Reflection. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your response to that show and how you see your work fitting into it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful show. I'm so honored to be in that show with 3 amazing artists curated by a wonderful curator, and yeah, I just think the show really looks great. I think that the work of all 4 of us kind of just speaks to one another really well, and it just kind of fell together, it seems like. It just feels like it's all supposed to be there. As far as my work being in this themed show, I think that uh, my work speaks to both resilience and reflection, right? The idea of the painting and the layers and the scraping and the painting and the scraping and the layers, that that kind of working the canvas and reflection, the part about memory being a huge part of my work, I think kind of fits in with that really well. Yeah. Really happy to be in the show, really happy with the way it came out.
You've mentioned a couple of times about your process, like different ways that you do that. And yet I'm certainly aware that you have different themes, right? Play was one of them, and there have been several different themes in the development of your work over time. Is there a continuity in the process regardless of the theme? And has your process changed over time?
So the process that I go through when I finish a series of work and I go to start a new series, usually I don't have a solid idea. Once in a while I do. I had that series Remnants where, I brought photographs into the studio and I had the idea, I had everything ready, and that's kind of how that started. But most of the time that doesn't happen. Most of the time I go in without a real idea, more of a feeling of what I want to get out of the paintings. And I'll just start playing and messing around and sketching and writing and drawing and just looking at color and just start something until like I get a little spark, something that just kind of clicks just enough so that I'm grasping it.
Right.
Where I don't have a solid idea, and I kinda like that, where I'm, like, grasping, trying to hold on to this thing that I don't know what it is, but I know it's there, and I just kind of try to work it until it becomes a little more solidified, and it's
I
in that s
I wonder if that's one of the keys to the distinction between AI generated art and human generated art, right? Is that you're looking at the place where you're most uncomfortable, right? Where you're most unresolved. You're finding something that feels like you're not sure that there's something there yet, and then you go after that instead of looking at the place that's resolved and continuing to model everything on that. And it feels to me like, to some degree, that may be one of the ways in which the work you create is really distinctive from a work artificial or that AI or AI abstraction might have been created. It's just an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about it until you said it.
Yeah, it's a good point because that is really the place, right? AI is looking at all of this data that is given to it of finished work, right? And most probably work that they're feeding it is well-known artists, right? Stuff
Absolutely.
did. Whereas, yeah, for me, it's that space where the unknown, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel that there's something, and it's this kind of struggle until it starts to solidify. And then from there, once I have that idea, then I can kind of go with it, experiment, explore, try to figure out where it's going and kind of develop that through the series. And then it's kind of the end is kind of where you don't really ever know, but it's almost like eating a meal, right? You get to that point where you're just satiated, right? You're just good. If you eat anymore, you're gonna overeat and you're not gonna
Exactly.
that spot of like, is that it? Is that it? And so
Right. And sometimes it requires walking away when you're not sure that you've achieved it, but that's as far as you can go there.
right. Yeah.
So you mentioned Jenny Saville before, which is an interesting contrast. Obviously, from the way you talk about her work, it's somebody that you really admire. You yourself don't paint in the same way, meaning not in terms of maybe the delivery of the paint or the application of the paint, but in terms of the image. But I'm curious as to what is it about Jenny's work that is so appealing to you? And then maybe are there other one or two other people whose works you really relate to?
Yeah, I mean, I think is the creativity, the idea, but largely also the application of the paint. Her application is just amazing in the way she handles the paint. And so that I think is probably some of the stuff that I really um 'cause I wouldn't say that she's an influence, more of an inspiration through
Okay.
that. Other artists like Egon Schiele, right? He's
Yeah.
nothing like my work in a way because it's figurative mostly, but his line is the way that he creates the figures, the way he does that, that just is so inspirational to me. There's the lineage, right? That we all have that the lineage of painting and what it means to us. And when I look at these other artists and the whole history of painting, and I can be inspired by it. It comforts me to know that these artists have done these things before and probably struggled like I am, but also it kind of, in a way, also gives me a responsibility to continue and to really step it up and make really good work, the best work that I can because hey, they did it,
Yeah.
and I'm going to be part of this. I need to do it too. So
So where do you see your work going? Like, I know it's hard as an artist to predict anything, but given where you are now, do you have a sense of what the future holds for you in your work?
yeah, I mean, I think for the immediate future, more of the same, just exploring, with color and surface and mark making. I have a new series that I'm working on in the studio that I'm just gonna, kind of just let it evolve and see where it goes. So it's really, I don't see any major changes. Still really kind of dug in on working with the idea of memory and time, and kind of portraying that and other emotions into the work.
Cool. So just to wrap up, can you tell us where we might see your work online and, any particular places you could send us to go check out what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's Vincent Salvati.wix. I think I forget the exact website, but you can also find me on Instagram, and it's just Vincent underscore Salvati. And my
Cool.
website's on there, and the sites that my Saatchi site and some other sites are on there. That's the main place to find me.
Any upcoming shows, anything in particular that you're looking forward to doing or still working that angle?
Yeah, for right now, it's just a show at the Watch on Art Center, and, after that, nothing else planned right now, just spending time in the studio and working out my ideas.
Fantastic. Well, Vincent Salvati, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for being our inaugural video, and we look forward to seeing what you're doing going forward and how your work develops.
Great, thank you, I appreciate it.